Now let's discuss the data management. So what is data mining, or let's talk about the exploratory data analysis, which is called EDA. So data mining, as we say, it helps you to identify and discover the kind of hidden patterns or the kind of trends in the large data set. It is one of the activities in the data analysis. So data mining basically helps you to study mostly on the structured data. So the goal of data mining is to make the existing data more useful in order to be able to obtain the underlying trends or distribution in the data pattern. So data mining do not need to have any kind of preconceived hypothesis to identify the pattern or any trend in the data. Data mining is based on the mathematical and scientific methods to identify the patterns or the kind of trends which are available in the data. So now let's look at what is database. So formally, a database refers to a set of related data and the way in which it is organized. So you can basically access your data usually through a database management system. So database management system consists of an integrated set of computer software that allows the users to interact with one or more databases, and it provides the accesses to all the data contained in the databases. So DBMS as a concept provides various functions that allow the entry, storage, and retrieval of large quantity of information, and provides the ways to manage how that information is organized. So because of the close relationship between them, the term database is often used casually to refer to both the database and the DBMS used to manipulate it. So now let's look at what is relational database. So relational database is more of a digital database which is uh, based on the relational model, which were basically proposed way back in 1970s by E.F. Code. So the relational database technology still is relevant. It's most efficient, flexible, and reliable way of accessing any structured information. So the item in a relational database are organized in the form of tables having rows and columns. So your relational model allows any table to be related to any other by means of common fields. So you have a key value pair which is allowing you to access your information. So what is RDBMS? So RDBMS, as we call, is a software system which is used to maintain the relational database in the RDBMS concept. So widely known RDBMS systems include MySQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, PostgreSQL, IBM DB2, Microsoft Accesses. So these are some of the examples of RDBMS systems which are currently being used across. There are also some cloud data warehouses such as Snowflakes. You have Redshift, which is also again one of the cloud-based data warehouses as well. So now let's look at what is SQL. SQL basically stands for Structured Query Language. So SQL is a standard language for dealing with the relational databases. So SQL is often pronounced as SQL because of the acronym which is used across. So SQL has become a standard for the American National Standard Institute (ANSI) in 1986, and it is of International Organization of Standardization (ISO) in 1987. It came into existence from the perspective of ANSI in 1986 and from the perspective of ISO in 1987. So the relational databases such as MySQL, Oracle, MS SQL basically uses NSI SQL in the backend. So if you see the overall syntax of SQL, it is in a plain English language. So what can SQL do? So it can help users to access data in the RDBMS system. So it helps you to describe the data. It also allows you to define the data in the database and manipulate that specific data. So with the help of SQL, you can create and drop the databases and the tables. So SQL basically provides you the function which you can use in the database. It enables you to create a view and the stored procedures. So you can set the permissions on the tables, procedures, and the view by using SQL. So as we see, most of the relation databases are based on ANSI SQL. They also have their own idiosyncrasy. So now let's talk about some of the sample SQL statement. So you should be very thorough with this because there are questions being asked in exam from these SQL statements. So these are some of the most commonly used SQL commands. So create command is basically used to define the database structure schema. So insert command is used to insert the data into the row of our table. Update command is used to update the data in the database. Delete command is used to remove one or more rows from the table. The select command basically helps you to select the attribute based on the condition described by the where clause. Drop command basically removes the tables and the databases. So let's look at the example. So if you see select star from customers, this is the way by which you select all the records from the customer table. So star basically says you have to select all the records, and from is the from which table. So customers is the name of the table in this case. So now let's look at what are the tables, rows, fields, and the columns. So if you see the data in a relational database is stored in a database objects which are called tables. And if you see this as an example, this example is an example of customer table. So this customer table have the columns such as ID, name, age, address, and salary. So a table can consist of multiple rows, which we call as a record for every data entry, and a row basically contains a value of all different fields in the table. A column contains the value for a specific field for all the records in the table. So ID, name, age, address, and salary, these are the columns, and the records 1, 2, 3, 4, which is visible, these are the various rows which is part of the customer table. Now let's look at the SQL data types. So each column in a relational database is required to have a data type. So your data types are used to simulate the most commonly used data types from the real world scenarios. Your data types of a column is a guideline for the SQL to understand what type of data is expected inside a column, and it also identifies how the SQL will interact with the stored data. So when designing the SQL table, we need to define what type of data will be stored in each of the table columns rows by specifying the data type for that column. Now let's look at the SQL data types. The following data types are commonly used in SQL. So let's look at the textual data types. The char bracket n, it basically gives you the data type which says a fixed length string of n characters can be used. The varchar bracket n basically gives you a variable length string of maximum number of n characters. Text is used for a large amount of text. Similarly, we have talked about the textual data types. Now let's talk about the numerical data types as well. So int, small int, tiny int, these are the numerical data types which is used to store the whole number. Decimal, float, real, these are the numerical data types used to store the decimal numbers. Bit is basically a numerical data type which helps you to store only 0 or 1s and which can be used to store the data. So we have talked about the textual data type, we have talked about the numerical data type. Now let's talk about the date and time data type. So the date data type, the most cases you will need to store your date only. So for example, if you see the birth date or registration date, that can be stored in a data type which is called date. So the date time slash timestamp is basically used to store both the date and the time in one attribute. If you have to store the timestamp, then you use the date, time, or the timestamp data type.